Hello, welcome to Unbelievable Tales.
She came for 5 awkward blind dates. She didn't expect to be rescued by the bartender. Zoe Martin thought she was just filling a seat her best friend booked. But after 4 painfully strange men and one who crossed the line, she was ready to walk out until a quiet man behind the bar stepped in. He wasn't part of the event. He wasn't even supposed to notice her. But he did. And what started with a free drink would unravel a secret he never meant to share and a connection no dating app could predict. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. Zoe Martin was used to being invisible. Not in a tragic, misunderstood kind of way. Just background. The girl with the oversized hoodie and a tired look holding a mop at 3 a.m. while the rest of the world slept. She had long since stopped hoping anyone might look twice. Not when her life revolved around her mother's pill organizer, stacks of overdue bills, and silent elevator rides in the office buildings she cleaned each night. At 27, Zoe didn't date. She barely had time to eat properly or remember to replace her worn-out sneakers. Love was something that belonged to well-rested people with brunch plans and time for hobbies. But then Riley happened. Her best friend, all lipstick, scrubs, and romantic chaos, barged into Zoe's tiny apartment one Thursday with a flyer in her hand and a wild glint in her eye. Blind dates. 5 of them. 10 minutes each. Classy bar. Minimal commitment. Maximum chaos. You're going. Zoe had groaned into her coffee. I don't even own clothes that qualify as blind date material. You're beautiful, you just don't know it, Riley shot back. Besides, if even one of them doesn't make you want to fake a fire drill, I'll buy you ice cream for a week. Zoe had laughed. And, like always, she gave in. Because Riley was impossible to argue with and, deep down, some small, stubborn part of her wondered if maybe, just maybe, something unpredictable could happen. Now, standing just inside the softly lit bar called the Finch, Zoe felt like she'd wandered into the wrong dimension. The women here wore silk and confidence. She wore a second-hand coat, faded black jeans, and a hope that no one would notice her scuffed boots. A woman with a clipboard and red lipstick waved her over. Zoe Martin? She nodded. Take seat 5. The rounds will begin shortly. Good luck. Zoe exhaled, clutching the stem of her water glass like it was a weapon. A jazz trio played softly in the corner, and the scent of citrus and cedar hung in the air. Everything gleamed, the glasses, the copper bar top, even the bartender, who moved like he didn't need attention to own the room. He wore a black button-up with the sleeves rolled up just enough to reveal strong forearms. His hair was slightly tousled, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met for a second. He offered the faintest nod, not flirtatious, just aware. Zoe looked away first. Then came date 1. Date 1 wore a blazer too small for his biceps and introduced himself as an early investor in crypto and human potential. Within the first 2 minutes, he asked her what her credit score was and if she believed in manifesting abundance. Zoe blinked. I believe in paying rent on time. He didn't laugh. He was too busy explaining the economic doom awaiting the uninformed masses. Date 2 removed his hoodie to reveal a tank top that clung to his torso like shrink wrap. Fitness is everything, he declared. The body is a temple. Zoe nodded politely, trying not to look horrified. You into bad boys or just hot ones? He asked with a grin. She took a deliberate sip of her water. I'm into men who wear sleeves in public. Date 3 was soft-spoken, polite, and clearly terrified of everything. I still live with my mom, he said 5 minutes in. She has a parrot that screams at night. Also, I have a mild foot fungus. Zoe's eyebrows lifted. You're very honest. He winced. I read somewhere women like vulnerability. I overcorrected, didn't I? She gave him a smile. Just a little. Date 4 brought his own set of tarot cards, except they weren't cards. They were elevator buttons glued to a piece of cardboard. I'm a performance artist, he whispered, eyes intense. You're not just Zoe. You're 6A. You're up. She stared. Is that supposed to be deep? He shrugged. Depends if you're ready to ascend. She wasn't. By the time date 5 slid into the seat across from her, Zoe was emotionally exhausted and already planning her escape. But the moment he leaned in, she felt the change in the air, and not in a good way. At first, he seemed normal, but his questions came sharp and fast. So, what do you actually do? Like, are you one of those people who find themselves with side jobs? Or do you just exist? Zoe stiffened. I clean offices. He blinked. Like a janitor? Yes, she said flatly. Wow, that's bleak. She pushed her chair back, ready to leave, but he kept going. No offense, but you kind of give off that vibe. Like someone who just faded into the background. No hobbies, no spark. Like, were you homeschooled by a lampshade or something? Her face flushed, part embarrassment, part fury. She opened her mouth, but the words tangled behind her teeth. And then, a shadow moved beside her. The bartender. Quietly, calmly, he stepped between them. Not loud, not angry, just steady. There's been a lot of weird tonight, he said, voice low. But insulting a woman to feel big? That's not part of the program. The man across from her blinked. I was just being honest. Nate looked at him. No smile now. Time's up. Zoe didn't argue. She stood slowly, her hands trembling just enough for her to shove them into her coat pockets. She didn't thank the bartender. Not yet. Her throat was tight and something heavy pressed against her chest, shame, maybe, or just the long weight of being talked down to like she was less. He didn't touch her, just walked beside her toward the bar. She climbed onto one of the tall stools and tried to breathe normally. The bartender returned behind the counter, grabbed a clean glass, filled it with something golden and warm-looking, and slid it toward her. On the house, he said simply. She stared at the drink, then at him. You didn't have to do that. No, he agreed. But I wanted to. For the first time all night, Zoe didn't feel like a ghost in a crowded room. She didn't feel like the background. She lifted the glass. Thanks, she said. Don't mention it. She sipped. Smooth. Not too sweet. Not trying to impress. Just real. Nice choice, she murmured. He smiled a little. Figured you needed something honest. They didn't speak for a while after that. Not because there was nothing to say, but because silence, for once, didn't feel empty. The jazz trio still played. Glasses still clinked. The last rounds of dates carried on in the background like a show she no longer had to perform in. After a while, he said, You okay? She nodded. I've had worse nights. He raised an eyebrow, just a little. That's either impressive or depressing. Zoe smiled, really smiled, and it startled them both. Maybe both, she said. And for the first time in a long while, she wasn't in a hurry to leave. Most of the other guests had already left, giggling in groups or tapping furiously on their phones. The host collected name tags. The lights dimmed just enough to signal show's over. But Zoe stayed. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the drink, smooth and grounding. Or maybe it was the man behind the bar who didn't fill silence with noise and didn't ask her to explain herself. He was cleaning glasses now, methodical and calm. The kind of person who made even being still feel like a choice. Zoe watched him for a while, then asked, So, do you always intervene when your patrons implode? He glanced up. Only the ones who deserve better. Something in her chest tightened. Do you say that to all the janitors? He paused. No, he said. Just the ones who quote Tolstoy under their breath between insults. She blinked. You heard that. He gave a small nod. All happy families are alike. That was a bold one to throw at a speed date. She huffed a laugh, surprised. You're the first person who's caught that. Guilty of rereading Anna Karenina too many times, he said, shrugging. The parts before it goes full train. Zoe shook her head. Wow, a literary bartender. He leaned an elbow on the counter. Don't tell anyone. It ruins the whole mysterious vibe. There was another silence, but it felt companionable now. Warm. Then he asked, gently, like someone knocking on a door with no intention of forcing it open. Is that your main job? She looked down at her glass. Cleaning. He nodded. Yeah. Nights in office buildings downtown. Mostly empty. Sometimes haunted. He tilted his head. Haunted? She smiled slightly. There's a copier on the 6th floor that turns on by itself and prints blank pages at 3:15 every night. I've made peace with it. We coexist. He grinned, a real one this time. Sounds intense. It's peaceful, actually. Everyone's gone. Just me and the ghosts. He wiped down the bar in a slow, thoughtful motion. And during the day? Zoe hesitated. I take care of my mom. She had a stroke 2 years ago. Can't be alone too long. I cook, help with meds, play the radio loud so she doesn't feel like the apartment's swallowing her. Nate didn't say, I'm sorry. He didn't frown with pity. He just nodded. That's a full-time job. It is, she said softly. Only it doesn't pay. He looked at her for a moment. Not in judgment, but in that focused, quiet way that made her feel seen. I work weekends too, she added. Kiosk in Riverside Park. Just coffee, muffins, angry joggers. He smirked. Sounds like a party. She shrugged. You ever want to watch someone cry over spilled oat milk at 9 a.m.? Come find me. We're by the big slide. He tapped the bar once. Noted. They didn't exchange numbers. He didn't ask. She didn't offer. But when she stood up and pulled her coat tighter around herself, he said, Get home safe. She glanced over her shoulder. I always do. Outside, the night felt different. Not softer, just less cold. The sky was still gray when Zoe dropped her keys into the side pocket of her backpack and stepped into Riverside Park. 6:48 a.m. Her shift had ended less than an hour ago. She hadn't spoken a word to anyone since midnight, except for maybe the copier, which refused to stay dead. This had become her ritual. After work, before the kiosk opened at 9 o'clock, she'd come here, sit on the bench just outside the little wooden cart that would soon serve as her coffee battlefield. It was the only moment in the day that felt like hers. She'd read, sometimes draw in the edges of old receipts, watch dogs try to eat squirrels, watch squirrels pretend to be offended. Let the wind remind her she was still alive. Today, she pulled out a paperback novel she'd already read 3 times. The one with a cracked spine and a character who was always braver than she felt. She had just flipped the page when, Is this seat taken? The voice came low. Familiar. She turned. Nate. Same black shirt. Sleeves casually pushed up. In his hands, 2 paper cups. Her heart did something stupid. You're up early, she said. I make coffee for a living, he replied. Internal alarm clocks are part of the package. He offered her one of the cups. She took it. It was warm, smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. Not the kind of thing you pick at random. You remembered, she said. He sat beside her. Hard to forget the only person I've met who uses the words copier demon and numbing existential dread in the same sentence. Zoe laughed softly into the lid of her cup. For a while they just sat. Birds chirped. A jogger ran by with a corgi in a raincoat. Someone practiced Tai Chi near the fountain. She glanced sideways. So what brings you here? Really? He didn't look at her. Wanted to see you again. Without 10 minutes and a number tag. The honesty in his voice stopped her. No games. No cool act. Just words that made something deep in her chest ache in a good way. She looked down at her shoes. I'm here most mornings. Between lives. He nodded. Then I'll be here too. Later that week. After another half shift at the kiosk and a shared muffin on the same bench, Zoe surprised herself. "I know this is weird," she said, brushing powdered sugar off her fingers. "But do you want to see where I actually work?" Nate tilted his head. "Haunted floors and demon copiers?" She smirked. "Exactly." That night, they met again, this time outside the sleek office tower on 7th and Lark. It was nearly midnight. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet only cities had when no one expected silence. Zoe buzzed them in with a keycard. The lobby lights flickered awake. Marble floors. Tall plants that never moved. Echoes that followed every step. "You don't need to pretend to be impressed," she said. "Oh, I'm not pretending. This place looks like it charges rent to ghosts." She laughed louder than she meant to. The sound bounced off the polished walls and made her blush. They rode the elevator to the 9th floor. She handed him a second mop. "You're not getting the deluxe tour unless you help." "Fair enough," Nate said, rolling up his sleeves. They moved through the offices, wiping down tables, emptying bins, fighting a broken vacuum that wheezed like it had asthma. She told him stories about the intern who once left a birthday cake in the microwave for an hour, about the CEO who never smiled in person but used 40 smiley emojis in emails. Nate listened. Asked things no one had ever cared to ask, like why she chose classical playlists for cleaning or why she sometimes wore mismatched socks. They paused in a glass-walled conference room. "I like this one," Zoe said. "Good echo." She stood at the head of the long table and said dramatically, "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I propose we replace all chairs with beanbags and add mandatory nap time." Nate leaned against the doorframe, grinning. "Sold." She sat down suddenly, quieter now. "It's stupid, but when I'm here, I feel like I exist. Even if it's just for the plants and the copier." He stepped inside and looked around. "I get it," he said. Later, they rode the elevator back down, the mop handles sticking out awkwardly from a rolling bin. Outside, the air was crisp. Dawn was starting to blur the edges of the night. They walked in silence until they reached her building, a narrow, weathered walk-up with peeling numbers and a sleepy cat on the stairs. She paused near the door. "Not many people stay this late," she murmured, "or this early." Nate looked at her, eyes soft. "Not many people let me in." She didn't say anything, just held the door open a little longer than necessary before slipping inside. He waited until he heard the second-floor window light click on, then turned and walked into the quiet city. Saturday came quietly. Zoe was behind the kiosk early, as usual, her fingers already stiff from setting up the syrup bottles in perfect rows. The morning was still cool, the sun barely cresting above the rooftops and the park glimmered faintly with dew. It was one of those slow-building mornings, the kind that started empty but soon would burst into motion. She didn't expect him to show up today. Nate had texted the night before, just a simple "work late shift tonight, hope you get sunshine tomorrow," and nothing else. He hadn't come by for 2 days now. Maybe that was a good thing. Maybe giving it all a little breathing room was what made it real. Still, part of her glanced at the far path leading in from the bar side of the neighborhood. Just in case. The line started forming around 9:30. Strollers. Joggers. 2 older women in matching scarves. Business types with backpacks slung over one shoulder. And then a group of 3 young women, mid-20s, glossy ponytails and expensive coffee cups already in hand, passed by the kiosk. They didn't stop, but they didn't need to. Zoe caught their conversation clearly through the open window. "I swear it's him," one of them was saying, loud and animated. "Nate Hale. He was on that Founders to Phantoms podcast, the one where they cover startup guys who vanish after cashing out." "No way," said another, laughing. "The guy from the wellness app? He works in a bar now. That's what people said online. Sold his company, then ghosted the industry. No Instagram, no interviews. He just disappeared. Honestly, kind of iconic." Zoe froze. The espresso handle was halfway loaded in her grip. The milk pitcher untouched on the counter. Nate Hale. Not just Nate. Not just the guy in the black shirt with rolled-up sleeves who helped her mop floors and remembered her coffee order, but someone known, famous even. They kept walking, kept laughing, probably never knew she'd heard them. She finished her shift on autopilot, smiling, nodding, scribbling names, but her hands shook every time she reached for a cup. When she got home, she helped her mom eat soup, then sat on the couch with the radio playing jazz too softly to distract her. Then she opened her laptop. A single search. Nate Hale. The results filled the screen immediately. Photos, interviews, tech blogs. One headline, from wellness wunderkind to vanishing act, where's Nate Hale now? Her breath caught. She clicked the first link. His face younger, in a clean white shirt on a TEDx stage, talking about burnout and balance, about how wellness shouldn't be a luxury. She stared at the screen, feeling like a fool. Not because he was rich, but because he never told her. He knew everything about her life, her mother, her cleaning shifts, her mismatched socks, and the haunted copier, and she didn't even know his last name. So that night, as the bar glowed with its usual low amber light, Zoe walked in. He looked up from the sink and smiled, a real one. She didn't smile back. She stopped a few feet from the bar. You knew everything about me, she said, but I didn't even know your last name. Nate set the glass down slowly. I was going to tell you, he said. When? I didn't want the name to come first. I didn't want it to be about that. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't waver. You sat beside me like you were no one. And maybe I fell for that. For the quiet. For the stillness. But now I don't even know what was real. He stepped forward. This was real. You should have told me. I needed you to see me first, he said softly. Just me. She nodded, then turned and left. Outside, the cold hit differently. Not sharp, not bitter, just quiet. Zoe walked without knowing where she was going, past familiar streets that no longer felt like hers. Her breath came out in white curls, and the sounds of the city seemed to stretch away from her, even the taxis, the late diners, the blinking signs. She got home before midnight. Her mom was still awake, half propped on pillows, radio humming a tinny Ella Fitzgerald tune. Hey, sweet pea, her mother said, voice thick with sleep. Zoe pulled her shoes off, set her bag down gently. Did you eat? Her mom nodded. The soup was good. I saved you half. Zoe sat on the edge of the bed, one hand on the blanket. For a long time, she didn't speak, just listened to the soft swing of the music and the slow breath beside her. Then, quietly, she asked, Mom, if someone lies by omission, is that still lying? Her mom was quiet a moment. I guess it depends, she said softly, on what they were trying to protect. You? Or themselves? Zoe didn't answer. Her eyes stung, from the cold, from the air, from everything she hadn't cried about in years. She stayed there until her mother's breathing evened out. Then she walked to the window, stared out at the blinking lights. One truth had undone her. Not because of what it meant, but because of what it didn't say. It was the kind of gray morning that blurred everything, the skyline, the pavement, the thoughts Zoe tried to outrun. She hadn't heard from Nate in days. Not since she walked out of the bar. Not since the air between them had shifted from warmth to silence. Then, on her doorstep, she found a package. It wasn't addressed in handwriting she recognized. Just a simple brown paper bundle tied with string. Inside was a small thermos of coffee, still warm, and a sheet of paper folded twice. It wasn't a letter, just a sketch. Hers. The one she thought she'd lost, the line drawing she did months ago on a paper napkin at the kiosk, a little boy chasing pigeons under the park fountain. Someone had smoothed out the wrinkles, added soft color in pencil, and outlined the child's smile with an aching kind of care. At the bottom he had written, for the artist who saw more. There was a second note tucked behind the drawing. It read, there's a community art event tomorrow. Children's fundraiser. I'll be behind the scenes. If you want to see the rest of me, that's where I'll be. N. She almost didn't go. Almost. But something about the way the boy's shoes had been shaded, the attention, the reverence made her chest ache in a new way. She almost turned back 3 times on the way there. The first time it was when she passed the bookstore window with her reflection in it, tired eyes, faded jacket, same old shoes. What was she even doing? Coming to an event hosted by a man who had been in magazines, who had money, who had secrets. The second time it was the laughter of polished parents near the carousel. They looked like they belonged here, bright smiles, clean nails, families in matching denim. She didn't. But the third time, just as she reached the park gate, a little girl with mismatched mittens tripped in front of her and dropped a cardboard crown she had clearly made herself. Zoe knelt instinctively, picked it up, and handed it back. The girl grinned, toothy and wild. "Thanks. It's for the princess parade." Zoe blinked. "Princess parade?" The girl pointed past the trees. "Over there. By the bubble tent." It was silly. It was sweet. It was real. So she stayed. The chalk art was stunning, layered like tiny murals, each square done by a child with the help of volunteers. Zoe paused at one where a boy had drawn a dragon with purple scales. Another where a girl had written, "This is my family," and drawn 3 people, 2 adults, 1 cat, and what might have been a robot. She caught her breath more than once. She saw a station where kids made bookmarks for hospital libraries. A quiet zone with soft beanbags and picture books in Braille. A little boy using a wheelchair painted a superhero with a golden cape, and on the wall beside him, someone had written, "Everyone deserves a page where they win." Zoe's throat tightened. And then she saw him. Nate was kneeling beside a child who had dropped her brush into the grass. He didn't direct. He didn't hover. He just helped her squeeze a new drop of paint and nodded like she was the one in charge. When he finally saw Zoe, his expression didn't change much. Just a slight breath. A steadiness. She watched as he stood, dusted his palms on his jeans, and walked slowly toward her. "Didn't expect you to come," he said. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "I almost left twice." "Why didn't you?" She looked past him, at the light filtering through trees, at the hum of the place. "Because this doesn't feel fake," she said. "And neither did you. Until it did." He nodded once. Didn't push. She glanced at the easels. "Why do you do this?" "Because she couldn't," he said. There was no need to ask who he meant. "I tried to fix things with code once," he said. "Thought if I built something good enough, I could make the pain worth it. But the truth is healing happens here. In places like this. Not on spreadsheets." Zoe looked at him for a long moment. "You know," she said quietly, "for someone who wanted to disappear, you left a trail of good things." Nate gave a soft smile. "You found one." She shook her head. "I wasn't looking." He took a small step forward. "I don't want to be a ghost anymore." She didn't answer that. Not yet. Instead, she stepped back, exhaled slowly. "I can't just pretend it didn't hurt," she said. "I know. You don't get to choose how people hurt," she said again. "But you can choose what you do next." He nodded again. And she walked away. But this time, her fingers brushed his as she passed. A flicker. A maybe. A beginning. The package arrived 3 days later. No return address. Just her name in neat handwriting across the front. Zoe opened it slowly, her fingers brushing against the smooth paper inside. At first, it was just a tin of colored pencils, soft hues, the kind that didn't bleed or crack, the kind real artists used. She hadn't owned pencils like that in years. And then she saw the sketch. Her own, again, the one Nate had found and kept. But now it had been restored. Lines she had rushed through now curved with care. The boy's face, the one chasing pigeons, was shaded, refined, smiling. He was no longer alone in the picture. There was a woman nearby, laughing. She wore Zoe's scarf. Beneath it, his handwriting again, "For the girl who made me real again." And she stared at it for a long time, then folded it carefully, set it in her bag, and walked to the bar. She didn't text. Didn't call, just showed up. The place was quieter than usual, a Tuesday lull. Nate was behind the bar, drying glasses. He looked up, startled, then stopped moving altogether. Zoe stood there a moment, her hand in her coat pocket, then said simply, "I got your message." He didn't speak. She walked to the counter, leaned on it like she had that very first night, when everything had been awkward and new. "You're not very good at hiding," she said softly. "I was hoping I'd stop trying." There was a quiet between them, not tense, not heavy, just full. He set down the glass and nodded toward the door. "I'm off in 5. She waited, and when he finished, they left together. They walked the long way, past the bookstore, past the fountain in the square, under strings of dim cafe lights. Their steps fell into rhythm, like they'd been doing this for years. At one point, Zoe said, "You're allowed to kiss me now, Nate." He stopped. She turned to face him, and in that breath, where neither of them moved, where the world seemed to press pause, he kissed her. Not like a secret, not like a promise, like a man who had found someone who saw through silence and stayed anyway. They kept walking after, quiet again, but something had shifted, not just in them but around them. As they passed the glassy silhouette of the office tower where she worked nights, Zoe glanced up and smiled. "Still want to see the ghost copier again?" Nate grinned. "Only if I get to sweep with you." She laughed. That real, full laugh he'd first heard across a sticky bar counter. And in that moment, it wasn't about the past. It wasn't about rescue or regret or what they hadn't been. It was about choice. About two people walking side by side into something uncertain and choosing it anyway. Together.
Bye, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.